If they get shared in the If the links get shared in the chat now, great. If they don't, I will pass them along to you after this. I'll make a nice follow-up for everybody that includes all of this information. But there are lists out there. There's lists for every television market. There's a list for every nonprofit newsroom. There's a list for every radio station, every newspaper that's still in circulation. The one that I think we miss out on because there's so many of them and there's really no way to keep track of how many there are podcasts. Now, podcasts range in listeners, right? They range in reach. There are incredibly popular podcasts out there that probably be really hard to pitch and be selected to be a guest on them. But there are also a lot of podcasts that have large followings that are a great way for you to get your feet wet if you are someone who is not as comfortable doing an interview. So that is another place that I would highly recommend looking. And an easy way to do that is just Googling. So Google podcasts about rare diseases, podcasts about autoimmune diseases, podcasts about inspirational stories. It's likely that you might listen to a podcast already that you could be a really great guest on. Look at their show notes and find out how they're booking their guests. Do they have an email address in there that you can shoot an email off to? So, starting your list and making, step by step, filling it in is kind of the first step. And I think it's important to note that you don't have to pitch every media outlet in your town. For example, I know with World Myositis Day coming up, I, for example, am at a disadvantage for pitching media. Now, you might be asking, well, why is that? Well, I'm leaving September 18th to fly to Dallas, which I'm sure so many of you are also doing the same thing. And World Myositis Day is Sunday, September 21st. We're not coming back to Minneapolis until Monday, September 22nd. So I'm out of town the 18th through the 22nd, which would be quote unquote like the prime days to do an interview. Now, I'm still going to pitch to television and radio here in the Twin Cities and hope that I can book something Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday before I leave. But I know that my hook is going to have to be strong. I do feel confident because I have done a lot of interviews with these people before that they know that I'm going to show up and I'm going to give a good interview and that it might not be the most quote unquote timely thing because I'd have to do the interview September 15th, 16th, or 17th, and World Myositis Day is September 21st. But it's something that I'm keeping in the back of my mind as I look to plan these things, that where I'm going to be and what I'm going to do is going to complicate matters. And that's one thing I want to share too, is if you're thinking of tying in your story to an event, you always want to do it before the event happens. Because after the event happens, like, unless you've raised an obscene amount of money or something amazing happened at the event, like something that just blows everyone's socks off, you want to be promoting the event as a part of your hook. It's like, once it's done, once it's over, it's very unlikely that a media outlet is going to pick it up. Unless I said like something incredible happens. If you have video of it, that's a great option to add in there. But yeah, the last thing I want to add to is, identifying reporters who have a specific beat. So BEAT, a beat is what a reporter is assigned to. Now, in most newsrooms, there aren't beats any longer because budgets have been cut. But in the heyday, or for example, at a nonprofit public radio station or at a newspaper that is very defined, like a major market newspaper, those people have beats. So they're always following the exact same type of story or topic. And that would be a great place for you to start in introducing yourself to them if they're a health reporter, a healthcare reporter, someone who works specifically on following stories in science. Another big one is community, because you're pitching your story, you're a member of the community. Who's doing those stories that kind of pull at the heartstrings a little bit? Those are always great options to think about. Now, what's your hook? So, to define a hook, it is for a news story. The hook for a news story is the unique and compelling angle that grabs the audience's attention and makes them want to know more. It is a critical newsworthy element that answers the fundamental question, so what? And makes the story significant. The question, so what, is really important when you are thinking about how you're going to pitch yourself to any reporter or producer. Like I mentioned, we get hundreds of pitches, sometimes a day. We are looking for the best stories to put on air. And a lot of times, what's difficult is you may have a great story and it's kind of evergreen, meaning there's nothing tying it to a specific date and time. It's just your story, right? If you can take your story and then tie it into something that's very specific, that has a very specific start and end date, for example, World Myositis Day, it's more likely that a station is going to take that because they have an angle to play with. Whereas if you're just coming in and saying, I've been through a lot these last few years, I want to share my story, I think it's really inspirational, they're like, well, yeah, we get a lot of inspirational stories. But if you say, I've been through a lot the last few years, I think what I've been through and done is really inspirational, and I want to share my story. And I'm attending the MyoCon in Dallas, and it lines up with World Myositis Day. It gives them a story to run with, right? Hi, this is Lindsay. She is a member of our community. She has this rare disease. This weekend, Lindsay's going to MyoCon in Dallas. And oh, can you believe it? It actually is also World Myositis Day. So, what is myositis and how can people learn more about it? Kind of fills the story in. So, when I say that to you, I want everyone to go back to their surveys really quick. And I'm putting the pressure on. I want you to think of what your hook is. And it can be World Myositis Day. It can be um, for example, it could be the anniversary of you starting treatment. Say that's coming up. It's been 2 years since you started treatment. Or for me, it could be I'm speaking at a conference in February and I'm sharing my story about being in the clinical trial. That's a huge opportunity for me to go and be like, hey, here's this hook, right? So everyone just take a second and go and fill out your hook and then submit your surveys so that when we get down the line here, I can go and take a peek at them. Maybe your hook is you have IBM and you have found a community in your local gym that has helped you stay active. Great hook. That's a great story right there. If I'm a patient who has IBM and I have found my people in my local gym and it is making my journey with my disease better, that is a boom right there. Like hook, line, sinker. That's a great story, right? One could be hypothetically, perhaps you are a patient of Dr. Worth and she's being recognized at MyoCon, and you could share your story by highlighting how incredible of a physician she is. So it does twofold, right? You get to tell your story, You then get to tell how impactful Dr. Worth and her experience has been with you. And then they get to acknowledge that Dr. Worth is being recognized at MyoCon. So you kind of have to get a little, I don't want to say sneaky. It's not sneaky, but you need to think about how you can make,
Strategic, I would
thank
say.
you. There we go. Strategic. Yes. How are you going to stand out from the number of pitches that they get? Maybe you have started volunteering in your child or grandchild's classroom, and it has been kind of a great outlet for you. And how does it affect your disease? How is it affecting you as a person? Things like that are a great option. I have one I'm working on in my head. I'm coming up on the 2-month mark or 2-year mark of having spent 18 days in the hospital in the month of September. And then in October, 2 years ago, it was the time when I couldn't dress myself. I couldn't get out of bed myself. I couldn't be left home alone because if I fell, I couldn't get back up off of the floor. And so now I'm working in my head on the hooks of 2 years ago, Lindsay couldn't be left alone because her muscles were so deteriorated. Now she can run 5 minutes on the treadmill. And how do I tell that story? Like think of all the stories that draw you in, right? Like what is it that brings them back around? All right. So when following up, and obviously, let's talk a little bit about, did I skip crafting your pitch? No, it's the what's the hook. Okay. So let's pause here really quick on before we move into the following up part. How do you craft your pitch, right? So I'm going to send you guys some examples that you can look at that will show you basically the rundown, right? So I'm going to go ahead and assume that no one here has like a reporter in their back pocket. If you do, that's amazing. Or like has a connection to somebody that works at a TV station. So you're all going in, quote unquote, blindly, right? Like you have no connection. You'd start with a very, very short introduction. Hi, my name is Lindsay Guentzel. I am a resident of Minneapolis. For the last 2 years, I have been working with Hennepin Healthcare on a collection of rare diseases that I was diagnosed with. And I'd love to talk with you about sharing my story with your audience. Then you share your hook, right? And it needs to be quick. You don't want to send over all of the information right away. You want to just get them to notice you. You want to say what the disease is, how it has affected your life, what some of the takeaways could be for the audience. And then you want to tie it in with the timely factor. So if you had decided that you wanted to pitch World Myositis Day, you would say, we have World Myositis Day coming up on September 21st. Is there any chance you have any openings on your show these days, right? Like you need to look at your schedule as the person who's pitching and say like, oh, I could do this day, I could do that day, this would work for me. And then give them those times and say like, I'm available this time. Could we talk about it more? If they follow up and are like, oh, we're interested, that's when you would follow up with, would it be helpful if I sent you some video? Would it be helpful if I sent you some photos? Now, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm actually going to pull up, oh, I have to exit out of this now. I'm going to pull up the file folder that I have. Let's see if I can actually find it. My drive. Myositis, is it in here? Nope. My drive. Media. Oh, I see where it is now. Okay. Okay. Go back and I'm going to share this quick. Okay, so I have created my own quote unquote media kit. It sits in my Google Drive. And anytime I do an interview, I can send this to the producer, the reporter, and they have access to everything in there. So it's got all of my photos, it's got all of the videos. I went through and I created a timeline for them. So I don't have to write this out every single time. This is the timeline of all the stuff that I've gone through. Here are the videos that you're going to find in those folders and what is on each of them so that those producers can go in and know exactly what they're getting. Now, you might be like, well, that's a lot of work and I'm not going to do a ton of interviews, which is fine. But if this is something you want to do over and over again, highly recommend just taking a couple of hours, putting in this effort, because then you have it for everything, right? One thing I will say, having worked as a producer and a host, and on the other side as somebody who pitches themselves to TV and radio stations, the easier you make it for producers, the more likely you're going to be invited back. I I joke that I could pitch the dumbest, like the most mundane story to any of the stations in town, and they know that I'm going to come in and it's going to be entertaining and they're going to have what they need and they're not going to have to worry about anything because I've done it so many times. So having all of this stuff done for you is a great way to just jump right into that. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to the presentation. All right, so present. Okay, so like I said, I will send out a ton of examples for you that show how I pitch myself, both when I know the person and when I'm blindly pitching. I do want to, today is an interesting day that we're having this and then we can talk about this. I was going to sit down this week and write out my pitches for World Myositis Day because the Minnesota State Fair is going on. And I was like, I'll have them all written out. I can send them next week. I know that every single person that I would reach out to in the Twin Cities right now is overwhelmed by what happened today. That is all they're going to be thinking about. That's all they're going to be covering. They're not going to be looking for a story for September 15th. Now, if we did not have a international breaking news story happening here right now, it would be a different story to follow, to reach out a couple of weeks in advance, especially because I know them, to be able to pop into, the producer at our Channel 5 or our ABC affiliate and say, "Hey, Mandy, I hope you had a great time at the state fair. I would love to touch base with you about finding some time for me to come on Twin Cities Live and talk about World Myositis Day before I head down to MyoCon." Once you've established the relationship, your pitches can be that simple. They don't have to be these incredibly thought out, worried upon emails. But you also do want to pay attention to the landscape and what's happening at that time, because unfortunately, that's a quick way to get on to somebody's no list, somebody's no-go list, is if a major story is happening that all hands are on deck for, and you are popping into the email being like, "Hey, look at me." So just something to share from the producer standpoint. I'm going to back up, see if there we go, helped a little bit. Okay. So when following up, you send your pitch, right? And in a perfect world, they respond. The likelihood that that happens is probably 50-50, depending on what market you're in. But so when you follow up from your initial pitch, some really easy rules to follow up to keep in mind is keep it brief, polite, and professional. The number of times that I get a follow-up email followed by a follow-up email, and like then the fourth follow-up is just bumping this to your top of your inbox, and it makes me want to scream bloody murder because you've emailed me now 3 times. I've not responded to you, and you just keep doing it. So follow up once, all that needs to happen. If you get nothing, it's unfortunate, but it's going to happen, right? Remind them of what you wanted to talk about, what you wanted to share. Make sure that you're giving them adequate time to respond. So typically 2 to 3 business days. I might even give it, if I pitched on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I might even wait until that following week and say, your opening line can be, "Hey, I hope you had a great weekend and were able to enjoy some of this beautiful Minnesota weather. I just wanted to follow up, see if you had any questions about my pitch. This is what I'd like to do. XOXO Lindsay." So we talked about this a little bit. Research the journalist, make sure that you know that the story you're pitching them is an area that they will cover. This was recommended from an article I read, like being smart about what channel you reach out to them on. Email's kind of always preferred. I'll get to a point where I'll share why you would call. Um, the suggestion was to avoid using social media DMs. Now, the only thing I'll say about that is that a lot of reporters actually do like using social media for finding stories. A good way of gauging that is by looking at their bio, and in their bio, it might say story ideas and then their email. So if there is a healthcare reporter that you would just love to get in touch with, find their social media handles. And it's likely that in any of those bios, they share how they are looking for stories or what would be the best way to contact them. And I am going to just stop my video for 1 second. And I somehow found myself in this very sunny spot. And, having myositis in the sun is not always the best.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you're making that adjustment, Lindsay. We can't have you sitting in too much sun.
We're having the most beautiful weather this week after having kind of a crummy summer of weather. And so I had to sit outside. Okay. All right, we're back. Okay. So more tips. If you haven't gotten a response, add a new value, right? But come up with another angle, come up with a different pitch, add a new statistic, find an article from science.com that talks about, the research that you're doing. Give them any little nugget that might open their eyes to what wasn't originally in your first pitch. And then be specific when you are addressing the emails. If you are sending a email to a news pitch, so we'll talk about that in a second, but a lot of newsrooms will have one email where it's like newstips@wcco.com. Then you don't need to be specific. Then it can just say, to the WCCO newsroom or however. But if you're specifically reaching out to if you're being specific about who you reach out to, tie something in. I mean, I don't want to say all journalists have a massive ego, but the majority of the ones that I have worked with, and myself included, have healthy egos. If you include in your pitch, I saw the piece that you did on ALS research, and I thought that this would be a great continuation of that. Or I've been really impressed by the coverage that you've done on policy work in the state capitol. I would love to add on, this. Like, knowing what they're good at is a great way to build that rapport. Keep it concise, make it easy to retrieve. So mention the subject line of your original email. They can locate things quickly. Offer resources. So if you want to include say Dr. Worth or, your physician or the physical therapist you're working with. Like, add all of that in so that they know that it could be this really big, bright, fulfilling story. Don't be pushy. If you don't hear back after 2 follow-ups, move on. And then keep in mind that journalists are really busy and that a lot of times it's not that they're ignoring you, it's that you've caught them at a wrong time. I think I have found it's a lot easier for me when I'm pitching a TV station because they always have producers. And so you're pitching the producer and not necessarily the reporter. Those people have a little bit more time on their hands to fish things out. But just, you know, being respectful that, these people, there's a lot coming at them at all times. Okay. Before we move on to those last few things, I did want to touch on, did anyone gauge if there's any markets that are doubled up tonight?
Hey, Lindsay, it's Paula. I was taking a look at that, and there's not a lot of overlap. Actually, we have advocates from all over the country. What is kind of interesting is we have a mix of major markets and smaller markets. And so I don't know if your advice would differ based on, like, I'm in the DC area. Is that different from being in a smaller city area or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. So okay, so
We have
let's see.
represented, just so you know, in addition to 3 from DC, also San Diego, as well as the Bay Area. So both in California, but not exactly overlapping.
Okay.
Dallas and Cleveland and Boston and Atlanta.
All right. Okay, I'm going to go with San Diego because San Diego is what I would call like a mid-major. Obviously, in California, LA and San Francisco are going to be higher up. But let's start. So we're going to say, I'm going to type in, I have to share my screen with you. Sorry, 1 second. There's a link that'll be coming to you that will give you a list of I can actually, give me 1 second. I could just pull it up and that would make things a little bit easier. Okay, so I know everyone says, don't cite Wikipedia, but sometimes Wikipedia is the place to be. So, list of television stations by media market. So you scroll down. I'm just going to go find San Diego. Number 30. Yeah, so mid-major. You click on San Diego. It is telling me all of their affiliates. So I see they've got a CBS affiliate, they have an ABC affiliate, PBS, NBC, Telemundo, an independent station, Fox. So because I worked there, I'm partial to CBS. So I'm going to go with KFMB TV out of San Diego. And doesn't look like it's got a website link. Oh, CBS 8. Okay, so here we see standard news station website, right? If I knew that there was a reporter working on here in health, I would just go and I would find their name. Likely in a TV station, like I said, in most of them, people are going to cover everything. So your tip is you scroll down to the bottom. You can do 2 things. You're going to click on Meet the Team and look for anyone who is identified specifically as a healthcare reporter. Now, they don't have them split up at all. Like, I'm surprised that they're not even split up by sports. Typically, it kind of will say like news, sports, weekends. So I'm going to go back. I saw them Meet the Team. I'm going to go to Contact Us. Now, this is where you're going to look for, we have a main station number. We have a news fax number. No one really uses that anymore. And then we have an email us. So this email us is going to take us to a form that we can just fill out. But I want a So if I click on this, it's going to email your question. Okay, so this gets specific, which I really like. This is great. So you'd go submit a story, go down, and then we'll say, Lindsay. This is where you would type in your story suggestion or news tip. I hope this doesn't just save my email address. I'm not going to continue doing this because I don't want it to actually send through. But this is one of the ways to start that connection, right? Just going through the simple contact us. What likely will happen is you will submit and then you will get a bounce back email from them saying, we have received your submit story. Now, I'm going to go back to my Wikipedia page. Did I close it out? I did, didn't I? Okay. So let's go back to number 30, San Diego. Now I'm going to go look at KGTV, the ABC affiliate. And I'm going to click here, www.10news.com. Now, one thing that has changed over the years is because of the need to always have content, we're in San Diego, but they're highlighting what happened here in Minneapolis today. So a lot of stations are doing that where they're taking advantage of other affiliates' content to fill the need to have something for people to click on. So same thing I'm going to do. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. This is where it typically always lives. Scroll, scroll, scroll. And I'm going to look for a contact. Now I see careers, terms of use, sitemap, news, weather, don't waste your money, entertainment. They do not have anything up down there about that. So I'm going to go back up. Oh, right at the top, submit news tips. So here you've got your news tips. You're going to choose the specific one that you would like to go in there. Whatever it is, send that off. Now, I'm going to just look at wcco.com. So this is our our CBS affiliate. And I want to see if they still have listed their contest program guide, join our talent, meet the team program guide. Where is the contact? Help, join our talent, about. Oh, okay, shows. Well, that is very interesting. I'm sure it is here somewhere, but to avoid having to search for that, I'm going to go WCCO TV Newsroom Hotline. Here we are. You can contact the WCCO TV newsroom by calling the tip line at 1-800-444-WCCO or by emailing wcconewstips@cbs.com. So, what was that? What was the affiliate we were in with? Let's see this. CBS 8.
8.
Okay, CBS 8, San Diego Newsroom Hotline. Right there, contact us. Oh, that's the line. So what I would imagine is you call that number and it gives you for one, or for the newsroom, press 1, for sales, press 2. Okay. San Francisco reporters who cover health. Reporters covering health in the San Francisco area include Catherine Ho and Maggie Angst at the San Francisco Chronicle and Victoria Colliver, also with the Chronicle and UCSF. Other prominent reporters are April Domboski with KQED News and the California Report, and Kristen Huang for Cal Matters. Tony Hicks covers health as a part-time reporter for Healthline. Amazing, right? If I go Dallas, reporters who cover health. See what I'm doing here, Paula? We have a list of the reporters who cover health topics in Dallas. We're going to Dallas. We have a nice long list there of people that we can contact and say, hey, this all is happening. So, like I said, I'm not expecting any of you to be experts tonight. I will tell you that if any of you want to write a pitch email and have me look at it, I will gladly do that. My email, I think, is available to all of you. If not, I will just put it into the chat right now. So this
I'm
is
doing
Lindsay. Oh,
oh, you got it. You're faster on the
yes.
draw.
Okay, so when we share, submit any information in an interview in person in print, is it considered copyrighted by who? And does the outlet that we use now own our presentation? So I need to double check on this, but news itself, there is no copywriting. The one thing I will say is that you would probably want to double check with them, like, hey, if you do the story on us, are you okay with us using it on our website, or can I use it for social media? Most stations have a policy on that, and most stations are totally open to it. Like, it would be against their best interest to tell someone to not share the story because, excuse me, that's more eyes for them. But let me save this question so I can come back to it. Just gonna pop that there. One thing I would say, and I would say this for everything, before you go out and pitch yourself and, say that you're going to MyoCon, or, for example, um, for World Myositis Day, make sure that you aren't representing yourself as someone within TMA, that you're an attendee, unless you've cleared it with TMA first. And what I mean by that is, if I'm pitching myself for World Myositis Day, I'm going to promote that I'm presenting on my clinical trial at MyoCon, and that MyoCon is put on by the Myositis Association. But I'm never going to say that I am a part of the Myositis Association. So, like, distinguishing the fact that the Myositis Association is a separate entity, and you yourself are a patient who is partaking in that. It's really, really important that you are clear and have a clear understanding that you're not necessarily representing TMA. And if that's something you want to do, have a conversation with the executive team first. But the same could be said for, I'll use a different example than TMA. The same could be said if when we were throwing out the first pitches back in May, had pitched myself and I had made it seem like I was a member of the Minnesota Twins, not that I was throwing out the first pitch at a Minnesota Twins game. So I hope everyone can kind of like distinguish the difference, that you yourself are a separate entity. The event itself is a separate entity. You're not there as a spokesperson. You're there to share your story, and it ties in with the events that are happening. Does that make sense? If anyone has questions on that.
Yeah, so I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So I get the whole thing of saying, like, you're not actually TMA, but can you say I'm like an active participant in the TMA community, like the Midas community?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I would say to that is, how you can share that is, I have benefited greatly from getting to be involved in the offerings that TMA has.
Okay, that works.
Yeah. Or, for example, if you are like, I'm the group leader for Minnesota. If I did an interview, like, yeah, I would probably run it past like Paula, Rachel, and Linda first, and just be like, hey, just a heads up, like, I'm mentioning that I'm like the Minnesota Myositis Support Group leader. But like, that comes with responsibility. Like,
I think that's exactly the best way to phrase it, Lindsay. And you did, in fact, align with us in February around Rare Disease Day for some of your media placements, and we were able to provide some of the latest statistics and insights from our medical advisor. So that's one reason to align with us, so that we're all sharing the most compelling myositis statistics on our community as possible. And the other reason is so that we can amplify your placements. I mean, when we know that you're being interviewed or that you're going to be featured in a story or be on TV, we put it on TMA social media. You become TMA famous in addition to famous in your city, state, region. So we love to do that. And we do just have to be a little bit careful about official organizational positions, right? So that's why it's not impossible to speak on behalf of TMA very directly, but we would work closely with you on that. And we encourage you to talk about TMA in the media as you share about your myositis journey. Absolutely.
yeah. The worst case scenario for any organization is if somebody gets up and is not in an official capacity, a representative of that organization, and then they say something wrong or they behave in a way that does not reflect, like TMA, not that this would happen, does not want to have to put out a statement after one of my television appearances that Lindsay Guentzel is not a representative, like a representation of the kind of person, like it's just safeguarding. And honestly, it's better for you as a storyteller to focus on yourself and to have the hook be like the bring around, right? And one of the things that I do want to mention is when you are doing your interviews and you talk about, like, for example, like the benefits that you have found from being able to find a community and that's been brought to you because of TMA, you're amplifying that for the people who don't know that TMA exists. And the number of times that I do a television interview and I get emails from people who say, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know that there was any," the number of people who message me and say, "I have never spoken to another person who has myositis or dermatomyositis or antisynthetase syndrome," is alarming. And so when you amplify your story, it's so important, but it also provides those connections for other people. Oh, I had a question slide and then I just closed it off. So if anyone else has more questions, feel free. If there's questions in the chat.
There are a couple of questions in the chat, Lindsay, and one is a follow-up about the first question regarding where the copyright resides. So the follow-up question is, if you do an interview, presentation, or article, can you then do another submission of this info to a different entity, or does the first outlet
Nope.
now own your remarks?
Great question. So going back, when I sit down and I look at my schedule, for example, for Rare Disease Week, I did a morning interview on our ABC affiliate, and I did an afternoon interview on our CBS affiliate, and I did a weekend interview on our NBC affiliate. You can hit all of them. I will tell you, like, if you're on a book tour or you are, a celebrity coming through town, they're doing everything. You have the right to do everything. And they don't own anything that you have, any of your stuff. Like, if you give them videos and photos, they don't own any of that. Like, it's airing, it's their package, so to speak, but like it's not, they don't own it. Um and they would never be able to use your stuff in a commercial, marketing, anything like that without express written consent. So, like, don't worry that, like, you're gonna do a news story and then, like, see yourself in, like, a commercial selling hamburgers, like, or that footage in hamburgers. Like, they might use it in a commercial highlighting their like the station. We've all seen those commercials, right, where it's like ABC News and then they show a bunch of clips of stories they've done. But like it's never going to be for anything other than that. Uh one thing that I also wanted to add in when we're talking about photos and videos, if any of your photos have or videos have a credit that's due on them, if you have if you've done photos with somebody and they've asked you to include the credit, an example of this would be I did a story when I worked at Minnesota Public Radio that got picked up by ABC News, which is incredible. You love that as a journalist. The photos and videos that were shot by our camera, by our photographer, those went to ABC News with a credit of Evan Frost. And so every photo that aired on television had his name on it because that was the only way he would be acknowledged in that. But for the most part, like John, my partner, has not asked for credits on photos or videos, so I don't have to credit him. But like if you've had professional things done, sometimes that photographer will say, hey, if you use this in any capacity, I would really like credit. I'm guessing that's not the case in most situations, but just something to keep in mind.
That's a good flag. Thank you.
Yeah.
One other question is here from an attendee who asks, what other reporters might be interested in my myositis journey and me if I can't find someone who's focused on health?
Science, people who talk about the workforce, if having myositis has affected
Ooh.
your job, is if it's affected, how you show up in life. Honestly, a lot, like I said, a lot of television stations, those reporters cover a myriad of topics. So if you go through and you find a reporter who's, there some stations have that reporter that are looking for the heartstring stories, right? They're looking for the stories that we all tear up at. If that's you, that's your person. Radio, we didn't touch on radio too much, but radio, I would say, news radio, like a public radio station, those newsrooms typically have reporters who cover specific topics. But if you want to be a guest on a talk show and come on to share your experience, pick somebody that you like. Pick a show you like
Mm.
to listen to. Like I am I was a producer for a noon to 3 Monday through Friday talk show, and whenever anyone else at that station wants to have me on, they have to ask his permission first because that's my show. Like, I'm going on the Chad Hartman show. But there have been times where, like, the 9 to noon host is a leukemia patient. And she wanted to have me on because it was something she connected with. Great. So just figuring that out. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Um,
think those are great comments. And I want to add one thing I have really enjoyed about the news interviews you've participated in, Lindsay. And I'm not in the Twin Cities, but you talk so much about Hennepin Medical and some of your care team that is locally based. And I think that's very meaningful at the community level for sure. And so that's another potential hook, or, if you can see who's writing about, the hospital in your area or the big university, if the med school's expanding or whatever, I think all of those types of reporters could be interested too.
yeah. Politics is another great one. The last thing I'll say is what Paula said that reminded me of this. Find out if the healthcare system you're in has a newsletter, if they have a foundation. I have shared my story with the Hennepin Healthcare Foundation. I have been featured in a newsletter that went out. Those are all places where sharing your story does matter. The other thing, think of like the alumni groups you're in. Are you in your college alumni? Were you in a sorority or fraternity? Like, you don't have to share your story with some massive outlet to make an impact. And actually, if you're somebody who's a little tentative or wants to get their feet wet first, that's a great place to start. Your church, your town paper, like all of those places.
Absolutely. Before we close out, Paula, did you want to say a few words?
Just thanks again to Lindsay for sharing her expertise with us. There's no better advocate to guide us through media pitching than someone who's been on both sides of the microphone or the pen or the social media platform or the Signal group chat or all of the other ways that reporters work. So thank you very much. And we're looking forward to your session on site in Dallas as well about CAR T clinical trials and myositis, decision and patient first person perspectives. So thanks for doing this session tonight and for doing the session in Dallas. And thanks to you all for joining us. Look forward to seeing all of the stories that will come out of this, and TMA will be in touch, as Lindsay said, with links and press release that you can use to supplement your efforts as well.
Absolutely. And I want to remind everybody that we have more virtual content coming before we meet in Dallas. Next week, September 5th, it is a special nutrition day. You can join us for Stronger with Support, the role of protein in muscle disease, followed by a cook along with Chef Tom, the former executive chef for Vice Presidents Cheney, Biden, and Pence. You can cook along or you can just watch and join, and we're hoping to get some behind the scenes stories about his time in the White House. So we're very excited. Thank you again, Lindsay, and we look forward to seeing you and everyone at MyoCon in Dallas. Thank you.